Hi, everyone. Welcome to Long Game, a Heated Rivalry podcast. My name is Silvan, and I'm joined, of course, with Declan, and we are nearing the end of our Heated Rivalry book review. Declan, we are at chapter 27.
Yes, which is the official last chapter before the epilogue. So this is interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how she wraps this up and what you thought of it. Because some people enjoy it, some people not so much. So I'm very interested for this stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine it's going to bring up a lot of conversation.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. You're right. So it's interesting how this chapter starts because this is technically the end of episode 6 of the TV show. You know,
Mm.
Shane and Ilya have had that conversation with Una and David, and now they're leaving Una and David's to go back to Shane's cottage. And so everything here is now beyond the TV show, which I think poses a really interesting way to look at this because there's no visual that's cemented through a shared experience anymore.
Mm. Yeah. So now this is like the new content. This is what people aren't familiar with if you've only watched the show. So it is an interesting couple of chapters that come up. It seems like it's a way of Rachel Reed trying to tie this story up in a way that feels a bit more complete, so it works more as a standalone for a casual reader. Um, Whether or not that's entirely successful is another thing. Um, Obviously, there is no missing the fact that the speech or discussion between Shane and Una doesn't happen, which for a lot of people was like the emotional core of the final episode. And whenever that happens in the show, it's so beautiful and it's a perfect sort of closure for Shane's sort of arc within the show at that point of opening up and realizing that he can be accepted by his parents and that he's not disappointing anyone and that he could always have been, as open and loved as he is at the end of the show. And so that moment is sort of contained within Una and his father at the same time. They sort of share that role at the end of this book. But there's just not as much of a personal emotional impact, I don't think. So yeah, it's interesting. What did you think? Because obviously you've watched the show first. Like, how did you find that element not being there?
I think I'd have to agree. I think that conversation between Una and Shane was so cathartic and so important, I feel, to Shane's development and his story throughout the whole TV show. And not having that type of conversation represented in the book, for me, felt like there was something missing. However, had I not seen the TV show, had I read this book years ago, like a lot of people have, I'm not sure I would have picked up on that. And that's where I think Jacob Tierney did a really good job at
Mhm.
adding elements to the storyline to really fill it out.
Yeah, I do remember reading this the first time, and I read this series before the shows were honestly even announced. So um, I remember coming to the end of the Heated Rivalry and thinking, okay, is that it? That was my general thought. When I finished the book, because obviously I hadn't read Long Game at that point, and so I didn't have that, you know, foresight of how the book is going to turn out. But I have to imagine that reading this as a standalone with no knowledge of the TV show or no knowledge of Long Game would be like a little bit deflating. And I did actually mention that in my original review. It's like, oh, this is kind of like just sort of finished, and now I don't know how I feel about it. It's good, but it's not like it doesn't blow my mind like people make it out to be. It's only whenever you have the context of the Long Game do you really enjoy this book properly. But yeah, it's a bit lackluster, I think.
I have lots of thoughts about the ending of this chapter, which is, yeah, we're gonna get to it. There's like 5 pages of notes before then. I love that you jump straight into it because I have to hold back for once. the way you probably hold back. And I love some of the comments that we've been having on our socials and on YouTube, where a lot of people have noticed your tells now, Declan. So they can
Mm.
tell when you're trying to hold something back, because I'll say something that is obviously connected to a storyline or something in the long game, and you have to hold back. And apparently, the people know now. The people can tell.
So what I'm hearing is I have a really bad poker face,
Pretty
which
much.
is entirely my mum's fault. I'm throwing her under the bus here. She has a very expressive face and she hides like nothing. And I like have to like try to like not emote on my face, especially whenever I'm like seeing clients because they'll say something really shocking and I'll be like, tell me about that. You know, it's it's hard. It's not easy. So I'm not surprised that people began to pick up on my tells, which is a little disconcerting.
I mean, the people are observant, just like Ilya is observant on Shane. And for those of you who are listening and not watching, Declan is wearing glasses today. Now, I'm not saying that that's a way for him to hide some of his facial expressions, but it's not coincidental.
Hmm. I never even thought about that, but yeah, that's actually useful. Yeah, I'm gonna wear these more often then.
So, coming back to the chapter, what I found really interesting was this theme of home for Ilya comes up quite a lot, especially in the beginning where Ilya says, "We should go home." And then Rachel writes, Ilya spent the entirety of the short drive back to Shane's cottage wondering if it was weird that he'd just called Shane's cottage home. He knew his grip on the English language was tenuous, but referring to a place he was staying for 2 weeks as home wasn't weird, was it?
Hmm.
I wanted to hear what your thoughts on that was.
I think it's an incredibly sweet moment where Ilya is basically saying now that wherever Shane is home. And there does seem to be something very valuable in the way that they view the cottage and the way that they view it as a safe space where they can be and where they admitted their love for each other and they shared so many of their favorite moments. And there is something very satisfying about that and about the fact that Ilya now associates his life and his sense of safety with Shane. And it's quite a beautiful spot to be in, especially for a guy who, for such a long time, um, had to name Russia as his home. Like going home to Russia, I'm having to go to this place that made him miserable. And every time he went, it was out of obligation. It didn't seem to be out of a love for what he was doing there or getting to spend time with people there. Um, Whereas it carries a much different meaning now. Like home is no longer Russia, and home is no longer a place that makes him miserable or a place that makes him feel unsafe and unwanted. It's now a place of warmth and comfort and love um, from the man that he's fallen for. And so it's incredibly sweet that Ilya is referring to it that way.
It really is, and it just goes to show, like you said, home isn't a place, it's a person for Ilya. And it reminds me of the Emily Henry novel, which then got turned into a Netflix movie, People You Meet on Vacation or something like that. And at the end, the narrator in the movie says something to that effect as well. So it reminded me very much of that. And to further that point, Rachel writes, he wanted to tell Shane that the closest he felt to home was when he was with him. It didn't matter if it was in a hotel room or Ilya's apartment or that weird hideout building Shane bought in Montreal or here at Shane's cottage. He was himself when he was with Shane.
Mm.
And what struck me about that quote specifically was Ilya hasn't really been to Shane's actual home yet. Sure, the cottage is his second home or third or whatever, but Ilya has been longing to get inside of Shane's home the entire book, and this is the closest he's gotten.
Yeah. And obviously, there's like a practicality to that. I don't think Shane would be willing to take that step or risk the exposure that that could result in. Like, you get the idea that the cottage is not really known to people. It's like it's an isolated place, and while he did do the documentary on it, you might not have any idea where it actually is, and so there's a security in that and a privacy in that. Whereas Shane's home, where he loves and spends most of his time, I would say, obviously, he might have his teammates around. people might be coming and going and visiting and things like that. So the risk for Shane is very real there. So I can see why he didn't want to bring Ilya there. But you get the feeling as well that Shane has more investment and meaning in the cottage than he does his actual home. Like the cottage seems to be a safe space. Like the documentary was made on the cottage, not on his like home that he goes back to. Um, and so yeah, I think what he got for Ilya was something a bit more valuable than that. Was his secret space, his safe space, his place of comfort and of familiarity that he loves the most. And so, in that, I suppose where he lives is just more a logistical problem, and the cottage is where his true heart is sort of is at this moment. So it's nice that Ilya gets to see it and gets to live in it for a bit.
He's getting a piece of Shane that he's always wanted and never
Mm.
had. And what's interesting, interspersed with this theme of being at home, which is going to come up a little bit later as well, is the theme of water. So we get water on the lake, and there was this really poignant analysis you did, like when we were watching the TV show, about the coldness of the lake, and but also the freedom that Ilya has in the lake, and he's the only one in the lake in the TV show. And I keep going back to this because water seems to be coming back. Now here we see Ilya pour a glass of vodka for Shane.
Hmm.
And what I loved was Rachel writes, "This vodka is special." He handed Shane one of the glasses. And then she writes, "Ilya closed his eyes as he took his first sip, enjoying the contrast of the frigid temperature of the liquid and the fire of the alcohol as it slid down his throat."
Mm.
Now, I'm not a vodka drinker, so I can't attest to that. But the juxtaposition of that it just seemed really poetic.
Yeah, there is something quite poetic about it. It's like that. If we're thinking of Shane as the vodka, it's that the cooling, the calming, but also the fire, the passion, the aliveness of what he's sort of getting now and what he's gotten out of the situation. Um, Something that turned out started quite frigid between the two of them, and then turned into this fiery thing. Yeah, you could go full English teacher on this bottle of vodka if you wish.
We could do a whole episode on this alone.
Oh,
We
absolutely,
won't.
yeah. Just ask for the vodka episode and we'll do it.
We would so do it. And it's interesting because Shane being Shane, and she stays really true to these characters. And that's what I love because she writes then, "Oh, wow," Shane said, "that is strong. I mean, I might need some cranberry juice or something." And Ilya says, "If you mix that with cranberry juice, I will drown you in the lake."
That's just a typical reaction for a Russian for trying to put a mixer in vodka.
You cannot dilute that stuff down or mess with their vodka.
No, 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 you don't. And it's the same with the Polish as well. Polish don't like you watering down their vodka either. Um, Very, very interesting. I don't drink vodka because vodka is acid and I can't stand it. I will drink gin, but no, vodka is where I draw the line. Unless you're mixing it very strongly with something, but yeah, it's not for me.
There's some self-realization that happens within this chapter with both of them, I think. So Ilya says, "Does this mean I get to see your apartment in Montreal? Your real one?" Shane says, "You can even keep a toothbrush there. I'm going to sell that other place. I was being paranoid when I bought it. I'm sorry." Ilya grinned. "Buying an entire building because you're nervous is very you."
Confirmation of what I said. He bought the building for him.
And also just bought the building to fuck in.
Yeah, which is kind of neurotic and incredibly on brand for Shane, actually, now that you think about it. Yeah, I mean, no hookup has ever done that for me, so, you know, get your bag, Ilya.
Literally, if someone bought me an entire building, I know he didn't buy it for Ilya, but if someone bought an entire building just to hook up with me, I would see the sunny side of that.
I would honestly assume that if someone was desperate enough to do that, that they definitely have a wife and 4 kids at home. Like,
He's
Why else are you buying that?
He's secretly living like a Hayden lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly.
And we get the humor again in this chapter. And this is what Rachel does really well. I've said this consistently and I will always praise her for this. And it feels like now that we're nearing the end of the book, the humor returns, but it's also staying pretty consistent because Ilya says, and I will say, Shane Hollander, will you please marry me so I can become Canadian citizen faster? And there's a self-deprecatingness of this here. And he says, and you will say yes because you're a nice, helpful guy. And I will say yes because I still be madly in love with you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you.
Oh.
Did Ilya just semi-propose?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say he did. Like, it's wrapped up in a joke, but it's true. They both know that's where this is going, and I like the idea that he like tries to soften the touch a little bit by being like, I'm just after that green card, that sweet, sweet green card that I can get off you. But also then the sweetness of like, it's inevitable anyway. I'm definitely going to marry you because we're in love anyway. But it's that sort of cheekiness that is just so typically him at this point that you get so used to. And so yeah, it's just it's a funny moment, very Ilya, but also incredibly them too. There is something about that, the seriousness and practicality of what he said, and then it meets the sweetness and the love and the humor. Then yeah, it's just a nice representation for the way that they sort of love each other. There's always going to be the wit, and there's always going to be the joking around and the taking the piss out of each other. But underneath it all is that love that they have for one another at this point. And it's good that they're so open and affectionate about it now. It's great. The best part of coming to the end of these books is you get to see your characters actually be really affectionate with one another and really loving and caring and just lovely. So yeah, love it.
And real, because the jokes they hit home. But then there's another joke where Ilya says, or maybe Rose Landry wants sexual experience with you that isn't a disaster. And Shane says, no threesomes. I think there's another book in there.
There's a fan fiction in there somewhere. Yeah, definitely.
Oh my god! So
Wicked.
I know Jen did go on a deep dive for us in the last episode about like a stalker fanfic, and she couldn't find anything. But I'm pretty sure there is a threesome fanfic where Ilya, Shane, and Rose end up together.
Yeah, probably. Don't worry, Jen will find it for you guys if you want it. Yeah, obviously someone's had they've written it.
I really hope so. You know, I love Rose, and if we can get Rose back in any way, I'm down for it. And one thing I noticed is that now that we're getting to the end of the book, the chapters are getting shorter, or maybe I'm just reading them quicker. I don't know, but it almost. I mean, we're at the epilogue already, and what this almost reminded me of, and this is not a dig at Rachel Reed or anything like that, but you know, when you're in school and you're writing an essay, and it's a really long essay, and you sort of get to the conclusion bit of your assignment, and then the comments from your tutor are like, you know, it seemed like you rushed through the last bit in the conclusion. I'm like, yeah, I just couldn't be asked anymore.
Yeah, you do get the sense that she was trying to wrap this up, and she was like, I need someone to finish this book off because I've not left a very natural conclusion. I've left the discovery, but there's no real emotional stakes in Shane's family because they're not actually in the book all that much, to be honest. And so them finding out it's Shane doesn't really have that big of an emotional impact. It's different from Scott and Kip because Scott and Kip are like they publicly out themselves. Like, well, Scott does. It's a big, massive thing that happens, and it has long lasting and very reaching consequences. Whereas with Shane's family, we don't really know, and we don't really see much of their relationships. We don't really care, to be honest. We care that, Shane and Ilya now have to address certain things between them, but in terms of like the resolution of like this is something that we feared this entire book that we found out, and it's oh my god, it's found out by our parents, but really care about the relationship with the parents because it's not been established that well. Um, and so I think that's where, you know, it feels a bit like I need to wrap this up and I don't have a natural conclusion to sort of run to. And I think that's why the epilogue as well feels a bit random, I would say, actually. Um, but as for this last sort of chapter, like official chapter, it does feel kind of like packed on at the end, just to sort of help with the flow of things. But I think it's just because we're missing that natural climax of like, oh, this is where it's all happening. This is where they're having it out. This is it, and this is where it all finishes up. So I can see why it's a bit of a struggle and why it feels short because it just feels like it needs to be in here.
I agree, and I almost feel like had Rachel ended this chapter with the sentiment of Ilya finding his home and Shane, I feel like
Mm.
that would have been a nicer way to wrap up in a way because there's growth in their relationship. There's a sense of belonging now with Ilya, where he spent his whole life being really disrupted. And so for
Mm-hmm.
me, the way they finished this chapter just feels a bit. It feels untethered to something.
Mm. Yeah, it's like where are they going next? Like, what is the next sort of natural progression for this now at this point? Because it feels not right to end at this place. Feels like we're missing something, a little extra something, something. And I think she does try to bring that down in the epilogue, but the epilogue feels so random. It's such a random event, and it's something that we didn't really care whether or not it happened up until like a chapter ago, like literally like a couple dozen pages back. And so at that point, you're like, is this where we're like jumping to them? Is this like where they're showing us the progress? Like, it's a little odd.
And because of the way the previous chapter ends, I think we need the epilogue really, because that jumps forward 16 months later in Montreal. But before I get into that, I wanted to ask you when you read, because you read a lot more than I do,
Hmm.
where do you consider the natural end to the book? Is it at the last chapter, or is it at the after an epilogue, if there is one?
I personally believe that whenever you get that last chapter, that's the story. That's the complete bit. That is where it needs to naturally conclude. The epilogue is like a little bonus. It's like the after credits of like a superhero movie. It's like, yeah, but guess this little fun little thing I'm going to tell you about that's just going to make you feel so good about the whole thing. It's like a sweet little moment usually, so it's like a little jump in time where um, basically you get to see them as like a happy couple and they're doing this thing and all that thing, but it has nothing to do with their character plot. It has nothing to do with the overarching story, or the story that they're trying to tell. It's just a little bonus. It's kind of like those like chapters that sometimes authors will put on websites and stuff that relate to their story, but just don't belong in the story itself. It's not what was trying to be told. Like Dinner with Hayden is a perfect example of that. An epilogue is basically like a Dinner with Hayden, but I think that the natural conclusion is the final chapter, and so it should flow like that. You shouldn't need to rely on your epilogue to rescue the end of your book. Um, that should be a separate thing that you write just as a little bit of fan service.
That's interesting. And I'm curious as to what the listeners think, because for me, based on the last chapter, kind of underwhelming for me.
Mm.
It doesn't do anything for me really.
Yeah.
And it feels like we've spent what 8 to 10 years with these characters. We've gone through a lot, and this is why I think it feels underwhelming, because the emotional arc of the story and the development through the characters and the situations they've been in feels so powerful, and the journeys they've been through feels really grounded in who they are,
Mm.
that when we come to this, like, the last line of this chapter is, come upstairs, you can kiss me and tell me about Ottawa, and maybe get me off because I'm fucking dying. Shane raced past him to the stairs. Only if you beat me. Ilya laughed. Game on, Hollander. Okay.
Okay. All right. I suppose. All right. I like. I much prefer I actually prefer the ending of the show. It's that is where Jacob Tierney literally cuts it off. Is whenever you talked about it just earlier about the ending with the sentiment of Ilya feeling like he's going home, of feeling like he is somewhere he wants to be. And it would have been nice to have like a very, very, very quick POV of Shane with the same sentiment of the two of them going home and feeling like they're going home together. That would have been a nicer conclusion um, than what is currently in the book. So yeah, it's what we end up with is basically it's relying heavily on the epilogue to wrap things up, which is, you know, it's not how I would have chosen to do things. But I'm not a writer.
That's true. I mean, the epilogue is well written. I do enjoy the epilogue, and I'm glad we get the epilogue because for me, the ending of the chapter feels a bit. I needed something more. And so the
Yeah.
epilogue does jump, ahead, like we said, 16 months later. And this is where we get, the press conference. This is where we get the realization that Hayden knows about their relationship. And we get a bit more character development for Una. And actually, the epilogue is a much better chapter, if you will, than how she ends the book. And so we get this epilogue starting with this quibble between them all out on the ice rink, between like Rozanov, Shane, Hayden. You can see Hayden has a problem with Ilya. Like they do not get along, and I love it because I think it would be too easy for them to get along because
Oh,
there is that rivalry between them all, really.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, like you forget that Ilya is a dick to like nearly everyone that he meets, and he particularly likes to like wind people up and to annoy people, and so that is all Hayden has ever seen him as. Like Ilya wears his mask around everyone except for Shane, and it's like because we are seeing Shane's point of view, we lose sight of that. So what Hayden gets is like the most annoying version of Ilya that everyone else gets as well. So yeah, it is funny how people end up reacting to him. But also presents an opportunity for Hayden to get to know Ilya properly and for that relationship to change. But I do like it as a detail for the epilogue. I think it's funny.
Completely. And again, the humor remains here. So Hayden says, I mean, I could have found you a nice dude if you had just. And this automatically brings me back to Una saying, what, there were no nice boys in Montreal?
This is
So,
the Ilya reputation preceding itself. This is what he's caused now with his mask and the way that he behaves. Is everyone is just like, this is a bad guy. Like, come on, Shane, are you serious? Like, this guy's terrible. Why couldn't you just pick a nice one? I could have found you a nice guy. I could have found you someone wonderful, but instead you went with him. It's it is funny because they don't understand that Ilya is actually really emotionally intelligent, really sweet, and incredibly kind, and very good for Shane specifically. So it is interesting how others view their relationship without being aware of like the inner workings of it.
yeah. But saying that, if you were Hayden and your best friend, you found out your best friend was dating Ilya Rozanov, you'd be like, what the helly?
Right.
Like, this is a walking red flag,
Yeah, like, do you need help? Like, what?
right?
Say your safe word. Like, do you need to ask for Angela in this situation? Like, let me know, please. Um, which is understandable because Ilya's been a dick to everybody throughout like most of his hockey career. So yeah, it's interesting.
And I like that they didn't dumb it down for Hayden. Hayden's pretty
Mm.
perceptive and he knows his friend. He knows that his friend is something's going on, or he's not driving as much, or he's going somewhere else and, planting it on his parents. And he's like, you're with Rozanov. Like, he knows.
Yeah, it's like Hayden is not as stupid as Ilya likes to think he is, first of all. But also that if people are willing to look and to notice that Shane and Ilya can be caught out, like as much as they are trying to put now safeguards in place for not getting caught, the love that they sort of have for one another is kind of unavoidable. And it slips out And you will find that in the continuing books, you will see elements of that where characters will spot that it slips out and they don't realize it. Um, and so it's a cute little um, taster for how people will begin to view the two of them together. Because obviously the whole point of this epilogue is to create a scenario for the fans and for the wider world as to how these two might be seen together or might be spending time together. That's the whole idea of the charity. Is obviously it's a nice gesture for Ilya, but it's also a good cover for them spending more time together. And it actually does then turn out to be something that they both value and they care about, Ilya especially. But yeah, I do think that their uh, their time is limited for how long they can keep it secret.
Absolutely. And as readers, we've been willingly suspending our disbelief, pretending like no one else can notice because they're just so good at covering it up. They're not. They're not that good at covering it up. And you spoke about the Arena Foundation. So when they have the press conference in this chapter, there's a point where Ilya discloses, he wasn't going to disclose about his mum, and he does. And there's a part in the book where Shane puts his hand on Ilya's, I think his arm or his forearm or something like that. And I'm like, oh, if I were a person in the press conference, I'd be wondering what that was about. And yes, it's to sort of comfort Ilya at a very vulnerable sort of point in the press conference. But there's little things that surely other people would have noticed.
Yeah, it's that idea of like I hope they can't notice how I feel like I'm looking at him or something along those lines. It's the little micro things that we do with people that show our affection towards them that like are little tells for how you feel about them or the kind of relationship you might have with them. And that reaching for his arm was probably instinctual. Um, After all, like they've now been properly together for over a year. So they have developed little habits with one another, their little couple habits and things that they do with one another that are just little gestures of affection. And so trying to keep this hidden, the longer that they're together and the more time they spend in the public eye, the worse it's going to be for them to try to hide it. And I like that this is sort of setting it up already because obviously it's only been a year and they intend to like go the long haul. Like they want to go until retirement, which is ridiculously stupid to begin with and naive. But already they are struggling to code it back and to be appropriate and to be seen in the way that they are wanting to be seen to keep this secret. So already the cracks are starting to show and they'll just get bigger.
I like that you talked about retirement because Rachel writes they had talked about waiting until one or both of them retired, but that seemed like too long a wait. Shane felt he could easily play for another 10 years at least. They're at their prime. They're not going to retire for another 10 years.
And so the question becomes, can I keep this a secret for 10 years or is it even worth it trying to keep it a secret for 10 years? And I imagine anyone who's ever been in a relationship that has had to be kept secret would tell you that no, 10 years is not going to work. Um, and here's the thing, they already have the benefit of Shane's family being aware of it and Shane's best friend being aware of it. But, you know, ultimately, where does that leave Ilya? Like, where's his confidant? Where is his sort of person to turn to in that situation? 10 years at least is not workable. And I think this epilogue is a good way of showing that there's no way they're making it 10 years. It's just not going to happen. Not in terms of they're going to break up, as in they're going to get outed, or they're going to out themselves, or someone's going to out it for them. So it's the drama of how is that going to happen, which leads you on to the next book.
Exactly. And that was the whole point of Kip and Scott. That,
Mm.
Scott wanted to wait until he retired. And bear in mind, Scott is like a couple of years older than them. So he's probably got another 10 years in Game Changer. And that was a deal breaker for Kip. Kip retracted. He was like, this isn't going to work. And so to bring that element into this now, especially in this epilogue, didn't feel like, I think you're right. I think they weren't going to make it another 10-year story after this. Something has to
Mm.
happen beforehand. And because otherwise, what's the point of having Kip and Scott break up because of that reason?
Yeah, because the whole purpose of their story was to prove that you cannot keep this secret. You cannot keep love in the dark. You need to let it out into the light, and it will only make you miserable trying to withhold that. And it's an inevitability that it's going to cause too much heartache and too much pain. Like people they have a tolerance. For some people, it's stronger than others. I think Shane's is quite high. I think Shane's tolerance for keeping stuff under wraps is quite high because he is naturally inclined to be that way. But for Ilya, who um, might wear his mask but feels his emotions deeply, um, I don't see that becoming a thing, especially with the amount of hang-ups he has in regards to his fear of not being loved and his fear of, uh, you know, having the same sort of family that he grew up with and all the issues that he developed as a result of his mother dying early and his father being emotionally distant and isolating and the hate that his brother had for him. Like, Ilya is someone who needs his love affirmed, and he is not someone that will want to feel like he wants to be kept a secret. And so, yeah, big problems ahead for these two. And I think this epilogue, as sweet and lovely as it is, has little moments where it's like, how is this going to work in the long run, guys?
Completely. And I like that you talk about sort of Ilya and the family element to it, because Rachel writes, this is the last 2 pages of the epilogue now. Fuck Andre. Ilya had a better family now. She
Mm.
also writes, his life was so close to perfect now. He wanted to be Shane's husband and to live together and maybe even raise children together. Not as many children as Hayden had, but like a reasonable number.
Yeah. Um, that's like already that's telling you Ilya would start now. Ilya would start all of that right now. Like, I don't think he really gives a shit at this point. I think for him in his head, he's like, hockey is like secondary at this point. Like, I want the husband, I want the house, I want the kids, I want what Hayden has. And I think maybe there's something in that, like in the fact that him and Hayden butt heads so often. Is it because Ilya sees like a version of the life that he wants in what Hayden has, and that annoys him because he also has a closeness with Shane, and it's almost like he might view Hayden as having everything that he wants. He has the relationship with Shane, he has the family, he has the house, he has the kids, and so yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a bit of jealousy on behalf of Ilya that's where the animosity between the two of them sort of comes from. I haven't really thought about that, but it's occurring to me now.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. There's a projection from Ilya.
Mm.
You're right. Hayden has the life that Ilya wants. Ilya can't have that life, maybe not now. And that's what he wants. Like you said, he would drop everything and he would start the life now. But I think it's, Rachel writes, baby steps, Ilya reminded himself.
Mm.
So there's a
He's
there's a
holding back.
tentativeness.
Yeah, yeah, he's holding back.
Totally. And even as we approach the end of this epilogue, I felt like the end of this epilogue for me worked better than the end of the previous chapter. So in terms of wrapping things up. So
Mm.
the end sort of paragraph, and I'll read it out, was he had a surprise for Shane, actually. He had booked a room in the hotel. They had less than 2 hours before Ilya needed to hit the road. But after years of practice, they were good at making the most of an hour or two of privacy. 1126, he texted, and waited for Shane's reply. Shane, seriously? Best news ever. See you soon. Ilya chuckled, set an alarm on his phone, and went to meet his boyfriend. That's a
Mm,
better ending.
it is a better ending, and it sort of brings them full circle. Um, they began by hooking up in rooms. They were strangers to each other in a lot of ways and emotionally distant, but now there was always a reluctance as well to meet in the beginning. Like there would be a reluctance from Shane's part, and Ilya would sort of tease him and convince him into it. But now it's like room whatever, and like, oh my god, you're the best ever. Like I am there right now. It's like the openness of their feelings towards each other and how they feel about one another. It's like a it's like a nice little contrast. So it is between where they started and where they ended up. And of course, the end with the fact that he's my boyfriend, which is just really sweet. So yeah, really lovely way to end the book. Brings the thing full circle. Um, I feel like we could have got here throughout just writing a couple more chapters, and it would have felt a bit more organic. Um, but you know, we have what we have. Um, yeah, I feel like doing the mental health, the charity here. It feels random for the story, but it's a key part of the continuing books. So the charity does play a part in bringing certain characters together, and that's the whole purpose of it. That's the whole purpose within the story. It's a tool to storytell for other books. Um, but it's fine. It's fine.
Well, I feel like bringing in the charity, yes, it does feel a bit odd, but it serves a purpose in this epilogue in that we needed that vulnerable moment for Ilya to disclose about his mom publicly. And I don't see how we get that otherwise. And it makes sense to have a press conference, and it, automatically pulls me back towards the beginning of the book when they have that press conference together. And
Yeah.
that's both in the book and the TV show. Now, I say this is a better way to end. For me, wasn't the best way to end. I felt like because I knew their story was going to continue,
Hmm.
especially into the long game, I knew this wasn't going to be the last time we see them. But had I sort of read this in sequence when it was released, not knowing that there was going to be a whole series, and maybe there was, I don't know if that was already the intention. Had I just
Hmm.
read Game Changer and this book, I would have been like, we've gone through hell and back with these characters, and this is how we end. To me, it's not as satisfying, and I know other people, and I'm happy to hear other people's sort of reactions to this. But for me, it wasn't a satisfying ending. It was cute. It was a nice throwback with the hotel room, sure.
Hmm.
I don't feel like I don't know what I'm trying to say. I think I wanted more, is what I'm trying to say from an ending.
Yeah, and that could just be intentional. That's the big catch is this could be intentional. It could be that she did leave you wanting more because she knew that she was writing the long game and she was going to give you the proper conclusion to the story. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. You expect bigger moments, more personal moments for them privately as a couple, like a milestone to wrap up a book like that. But they all happen in a different book, and so this is like I view this as a duology rather than a complete story. It's the first half, and that's the best way to view Heated Rivalry, to be honest, because it explains a lot of the pacing and stuff to do with the book. It does feel like she wrote it and then split it in half, like the full complete story. So yeah, I think that's the best way to view it, and to just take away from the fact that this was to encourage you to come back to finish their story, I suppose. So there's good marketing in that. You know, wherever it works as like a standalone finish, it does. It could just be a wee bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. She knew what she was doing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, she did. She was trying to. But I think it's pretty much where we're finishing then with this book, isn't it? it yeah, it's been very long that we've been doing it. So many episodes dedicated to it, and we have had a really good time talking about it. And for it to conclude like this, there is something quite nice about the way it polishes off with Ilya's mother's charity, and with the two of them reliving their sort of hotel days. There is something quite sweet about that moment that ties it nicely together. So really, the only thing left to discuss is dinner at Hayden's and just our general thoughts on the book. But obviously, we are running out of time again.
I think that's
um,
gonna warrant its own episode in itself.
yeah, that'll be our final one for this book anyway, and then we have some other content for the other books too coming up. So yeah, I think we'll finish up then with this one for now.
Yeah, and people have asked if we are going to continue with the other books, and the answer is yes. We are going to continue with the whole series, so rest assured we will be reading this. Maybe not chapter by chapter, because I think it warranted for especially parts of this book, and
Mhm.
we hadn't planned on it, can I just say? We just naturally fell into that.
Yeah,
But
like that wasn't like a planned structure. Just because the book and the show coincide so well with each other, and there's so much content within each bit of it, and it relates so much back to the characters. It kind of warranted that, whereas the other books honestly could only be like a couple of episodes each. Um, they are fun, but you can squeeze the discussion down quite nicely. Um, so think of a format more like that. So there will not be as big a wait to try to get through to the next books. That won't be happening. They'll be discussed more reasonably.
completely, I feel like a lot of comments we're getting is like, Sylvan, just get to the long game. All your questions will be answered in the long game. So I'm going to trust everyone's judgment. We're going to keep going. And I haven't read the long game yet, so I don't know what's coming. But there's a whole host of other characters to meet in this journey before we get there.
Yeah, so we'll look forward. But that is all the time we have for you guys this week. Thank you so much for joining us. This was the conclusion of the Heated Rivalry book. We finished it. Oh my god, amazing! We picked it apart like A level or GCSE English teachers. For anyone that doesn't know what that means, basically it's like our English schooling in the UK. But all you need to know is we deep dived this book. We deep dived it all the way down to hell. And we had a good time doing it. So thank you so much. Make sure you tune in for the next episode. We'll be discussing our general thoughts about the book, what we loved about it, things that we felt like we wish had been different, and just sort of like a roundup of what we felt and how we felt the story had been written, and Rachel Reed herself as the writer. Obviously, there's that bonus episode as well about Hayden, dinner at Hayden's, the little extra treat that Rachel gave out on her website. So look forward to that. Keep an eye out for that. And in the meantime, check out our book club as well. It's the Long Game Pod book club. We have finished these books, but chats are still ongoing there as well. But we are also reading different romances. At the moment, we just finished up Becoming Us by Alex Cross, and we're just about to start Sweat by Jonah York, which is a fantastic soccer romance. So if you want to be involved with that, check it out. It's on Fable, and it's the Long Game Pod. But until then, make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment. Make sure you check us out on Instagram and on TikTok too. So yeah, we'll see you next time.